What's up guys, before this video begins, make sure to like and subscribe as always, and check out the membership program to get things like shoutouts and daily video updates. Speaking of which, shout out to all the members we have so far. Anyway, enjoy guys. When you think of scary, what do you imagine? Demons? Ghosts? An angry kidnapping grandmother? Well, if you chose the last option, then good news for you, because the 2017 smash hit Granny took something seemingly innocent like a grandmother and turned it into a crazy horrifying experience. However, this game is approaching 4 years old now, and nowadays, even with how popular the game was during its initial release, the game has nearly entirely disappeared from any coverage anymore, despite some very interesting and unheard of updates to the franchise. But with that being said, let's go over the since dead game, and with some interesting integrations of the title and even a second and most recently third title to the series, let's take an outside look at the life of this game and answer the question, what happened to Granny? Well, before we get into some of the more unheard of territory, we have to start at the very beginning of the game's time, which in this case would be all the way back before Granny was even created. In specific, the very first step in Granny's time starts all the way back to a game called Slendrina. Slendrina was a massive 10-game series based on a player finding themselves in certain locations and having to find objects to escape. Originally built to be a Slender clone, hence the name Slendrina, who was supposed to be the daughter of Slender. Anyway, this Android exclusive series wasn't incredibly popular, despite it being very similar to Granny in a few ways, but it did lack some major features that Granny had that I'll discuss in a minute. But anyway, as always with most of these Slender clones, they pop up for a couple of days and just fell back down without any real traction. Okay, here we are with 10 Slendrina titles and not much crazy traction from them. However, the next title in the franchise, originally seen as the 11th title in the series, was going to instead be a spin-off of Slendrina. And come November 2017, at the height of the indie horror genre, a spin-off game in the same universe as Slendrina called Granny was officially released on Android and was later released on iOS. This game had a relatively similar concept at surface value, that being running from some haunted lady trying to collect objects without getting caught. However, Granny took this concept and took it way further than just another Slender clone by adding actual objectives to complete, very similar to what Hello Neighbor did, where certain tasks need to be completed to slowly unlock parts of a main door. Not to mention the fact that when the player loses, they are put back into the starting room, but also have to sacrifice a day. And after 5 days, the game's over and the player has to start from the beginning, which can be seen as a little bit annoying to some people, but it added a brand new element to the title, giving actual punishments for dying rather than just being scared. Anyway, despite the game's 2017 release, the game really began to pick up traction early 2018. Pioneered by people like 8-Bit Ryan and Cub Scouts, who led the way months later for bigger creators like DanTDM and Markiplier to shed tons of light to a mini title like this one, leading to an explosion in popularity. Granny began to exponentially rise among other classics like Hello Neighbor and Bendy and the Ink Machine. It was very weird at first considering it was only a mobile game, but this actually worked in Granny's favor, thanks to the fact that most fans of these games were younger and couldn't necessarily just buy a brand new game or get a PC to do so. But pretty much everybody nowadays has access to a mobile device with an app store, especially for a free game like Granny. Anyway, this game doesn't need too much more explaining on its actual popularity. People played it, people liked it, and more people played it. Simple enough. However, with pretty much every popular game, a question arises. What does the developer do afterwards? Well, there's many directions to go, whether it's spin-offs, other titles, or taking a step back entirely. However, the most popular decision for trying to keep the life inside of a game is to make a second title building upon the original, which is exactly what happened with Granny. After spending the first year of the original game's lifetime on ports and updates, the second year was dedicated to producing a brand new title releasing on September 6, 2019, called Granny 2, respectively. This version of the game decided to put a brand new twist to the Granny franchise. And with this being the second title, there was a second main antagonist, that being Grandpa, who this time teams up with Granny to help keep the player from escaping. Now at this point is where the game began to fall down quite significantly, mostly considering the fact that the original game was 2 years old, and the sequel was more or less just a DLC add-on to the original, which at the end of the day was just a simple mobile game anyway, and inherently didn't have that much longevity. However, there was something massive that was about to happen to the Granny franchise, one that even the developers couldn't see coming. If you've seen any of my videos, you've probably heard my constant preaches about how important the communities of games are. Not for the basic reasons like having people to actually play the game, but they can also work for the developer and grow grow the game passively. Word of mouth, Wikipedia pages, mods are major examples of such. And with any popular game comes various fan-built versions of it, sometimes helping reach heights that in this case can even surpass the popularity of the original title for periods of time. If you're still unaware of which title I'm talking about, in January of 2020, a Roblox developer by the name of Minitoon created a Granny fan-made game called Piggy. This fan-made game was a Roblox exclusive title that took the Granny concept and made it fully multiplayer, allowing for the antagonist of this game, called Piggy of course, to be an actual player rather than AI. Giving this multiplayer element to the game allowed for friends to actually be able to share the fun of Granny together rather than being forced to head into it alone. I won't go into this game too much, as at the end of the day it is just a fan-made title. However, I felt the need to mention it because this game I felt like was more popular and more talked about than Granny itself throughout the past year. I've seen it on Roblox, YouTube, even Walmart for goodness sake. But yeah, it was a massive title and I feel it definitely attributed to some of Granny's success. However, for most of you guys, you probably think this is the end of the road for Granny. I mean, besides some updates, there hasn't really been much for the title to go over. However, there was actually an under-the-radar release that actually inspired me to create this video entirely. And to locate it, we actually only have to go back around 20 days from the writing of this video. Well, we have Granny 1, with just Granny of course, and Granny 2, with both a Granny and a Grandpa. However, just hypothetically, let's say there was a third entry into the series. Who would you guys guess the new character would be? Well, let's remember what this game is a spin-off of from the very beginning. That being Slendrina. There were many Easter eggs put inside of the game nodding to Slendrina and its roots. However, there hasn't been any actual direct connection between the two series. Well, up until now that is, because come June 3rd, 2021, Granny 3 would officially come out nearly 2 years after the second, featuring Granny, Grandpa, and this time, the original pioneer of the franchise, Slendrina herself. Releasing currently only on Android, Granny 3 involved the player once again trying to escape a building. This time being a massive mansion they got stuck in after being shot in the head with a shotgun and only being knocked out? Well, anyway, this game is incredibly early in its release. But there's an unfortunate reality to face here, which is that Granny 3 is honestly not doing as well as it probably should. Surely there's the benefit of all the big YouTubers slowly finding this game once more. However, behind that curtain is simply a game more or less on life support. Things like the actual internal YouTube and Wikipedia community are seemingly dead. The actual fandom website hasn't even updated to account for the brand new entry as of now. But as we make it to where we are today, the real question that needs to be asked is, what's in store for the future of Granny? Well, with most developers, especially mobile ones, this would likely be a grim topic to discuss, especially with the declining performance of the game. However, looking back on the less successful series made by the developer Slendrina, we still saw 10 titles total in the series, including different settings, playstyles, and even dimensions. So as for the future of Granny, well, I'm not gonna go all in and expect Granny 30 to come out in the next few years or anything. However, to say that Granny 3 is the very end of the game's lifetime would just be ignoring all the previous quantities of titles, because Granny in fact could actually be just at the beginning. And while we already have a relatively successful trilogy as is, I could see Granny growing so much more in the near future. However, only time will tell.
Subscribe to Sheep Rampage.
However, with pretty much every popular game, a question arises. What does the developer do? Wow, that was a really bad voice crack.